Welcome back to Ego and Empathy, the podcast where we explore the psychology behind human behavior and the subtle ways it shapes our lives. I'm your host, Mandy, and today we're taking a look at one of the most polarizing figures in modern media, Meghan Markle. To some, she's a symbol of empowerment and independence, a woman who stood up to one of the most powerful institutions in the world. To others, she's a manipulative personality who broke apart a royal family and used her story for control and attention. The question many people whisper is this: is Meghan Markle a victim of unfair media portrayal, or a narcissistic princess who claimed Prince Harry and rebranded the monarchy in her own image? Let's unpack that. When Meghan entered the royal family, public opinion was glowing. She was smart, articulate, philanthropic, and for many, a breath of modern air. But that admiration began to shift as her public persona evolved. Critics pointed out patterns that felt familiar: self-focus, emotional storytelling that always positioned her at the center, and a strong need to control the narrative. British journalist Piers Morgan famously accused her of being manipulative and narcissistic to her core. Psychologists, behavior analysts who studied her interviews, including the Oprah Winfrey special, have pointed to what they describe as classic narcissistic communication markers: self-victimization, a lack of accountability, and emotional reframing to keep control of perception. In the Netflix documentary Harry and Meghan, she speaks openly about her pain, her isolation, and how the firm silenced her. For supporters, that was an act of bravery, breaking centuries of royal secrecy. For critics, it was self-serving, a performance crafted to maintain public sympathy and moral superiority. Here's where psychology helps us look deeper. Grandiose narcissism often expresses itself through charm and conviction. At first, the person seems magnetic, confident, even visionary. They position themselves as a force for change, someone who challenges old systems. But beneath that lies a subtle hunger for admiration and an unwillingness to share the spotlight without controlling it. That dynamic shows up repeatedly in Meghan's public story. Every project, from the Cut interview to the Archetypes podcast, revolves around her personal experience, her pain, her awakening, her struggle against oppression. She doesn't just tell stories, she centers herself as the story. And that's what many critics call the narcissistic pivot, where personal hardship becomes a platform for moral elevation. Still, it's important to recognize the double standard at play. Men who control their narrative are often called strategic. Women who do the same are called calculating. So, while narcissistic traits may be visible, the cultural lens through which we see them is far from neutral. Now, let's talk about her relationship with Harry, a dynamic that fascinates both psychologists and royal watchers alike. Harry has described Meghan as his savior, someone who helped him escape the emotional cage of royal life. But in that same breath, critics argue that what he sees as liberation might actually be enmeshment. In psychological terms, enmeshment happens when one partner's identity becomes absorbed by the other's emotional reality. We see this pattern when Harry repeats her language, mirrors her grievances, and distances himself from everyone who challenges their shared narrative. Is that love or emotional alignment built on dependency? It's hard to tell from the outside, but it certainly fits the emotional choreography of a narcissistic bond. One partner leads with charisma and conviction. The other finds identity through loyalty and defense. Still, labeling someone a narcissist outright is a psychological conclusion, and that's not something anyone can diagnose through the media. But patterns we can observe. The constant need to reshape public perception, the use of emotional storytelling to command attention, the inability to tolerate criticism without reframing it as betrayal. These are hallmarks of narcissistic strategy, whether conscious or not. So, what does that mean for Meghan Markle? Maybe she's both. A woman shaped by ambition and trauma, someone who learned early that control equals safety and attention equals survival. Maybe the public is witnessing not a villain, but a complex personality navigating fame through a psychological defense pattern that happens to look like narcissism. Because behind the word narcissist is always a wound: the fear of invisibility, the terror of rejection, the longing to be seen and admired. And when those needs play out on a global stage, they don't just shape one person's life, they shape public perception itself. So maybe Meghan Markle is a narcissistic princess, or maybe she's a deeply strategic woman who understands that in a world driven by image, you either tell your story or someone else will tell it for you. Either way, she's become a mirror for us all, reflecting our fascination with power, identity, and the fragile boundary between confidence and control. I'm Mandy, and this has been Ego and Empathy. If this episode made you think, share it with someone who's interested in how public image and psychology collide. And remember, behind every label is a story, and behind every story, a human need to be seen. See you next time.